The cell was cold and white. Every wall gave off a pale blue light that never changed. There were no shadows in this place. There was no darkness. Just endless, cold brightness that made Ethan Cole feel like he was trapped inside a freezer made of light. He sat with his back against the wall. His flight suit was torn in several places. Dry blood covered his left arm and the side of his face. The wounds had already started to heal, but they still hurt when he moved. 3 days had passed since the attack on his ship. 3 days since he watched his crewmates die one by one as the alien vessel tore through their hull like paper. Ethan was the only survivor. He did not know why. He did not know how. All he knew was that he was alive, and he was a prisoner. The ship that held him was called a cruiser. It belonged to the Velthari, a species that had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Ethan had heard stories about them back on Earth. Everyone had. They were the reason humanity had stopped looking at the stars with wonder and started looking at them with fear. The Velthari were tall. Their skin was a pale silver blue color, smooth like polished stone. They had 4 eyes instead of 2, arranged in a diamond pattern on their faces. They did not smile. They did not laugh. As far as Ethan could tell, they did not feel much of anything at all. He heard footsteps outside his cell. They were soft and measured, like someone counting each step they took. A moment later, a figure appeared on the other side of the transparent barrier that served as his wall. It was a Velthari female. She wore a dark uniform with silver markings on the shoulders. Her 4 eyes studied him the way a scientist might study a bug under a glass. "You are awake," she said. Her voice was smooth and flat. There was no warmth in it, no curiosity, just a statement of fact. "Are to sleep in here," Ethan replied. "The lights never turn off. The Velthari do not require darkness for rest," she said. "We did not consider that your species might. How thoughtful." She tilted her head slightly. It was a gesture Ethan had seen before. It meant confusion. The Velthari did it whenever they encountered something they did not understand. "I am Commander Lyri Vethshan," she said. "I have been assigned to evaluate you." "Evaluate me for what?" "To determine what threat or value your species presents to the Empire." She held up a small device that looked like a tablet made of glass. "You are the first human we have captured alive. Your file is incomplete." Ethan laughed. It was a dry, tired sound. "Sorry to disappoint. I'm just a cargo pilot. Nothing special about me." Lyri made a note on her device. "You were exposed to vacuum for approximately 90 seconds during the destruction of your vessel. You suffered severe radiation burns, multiple fractures, and significant blood loss." She looked up at him. "You should be dead." "Yeah," Ethan said. "I get that a lot. Yet here you sit, conscious, alert, already healing." She stepped closer to the barrier. "How?" Ethan shrugged. "Humans are hard to kill. We're stubborn like that." "Stubbornness is not a survival mechanism," Lyri said. "It is irrational, maybe, but it got me this far." Lyri studied him for a long moment. Her 4 eyes moved independently, examining different parts of him at the same time. It was unsettling, like being watched by 4 people at once. "The Velthari have encountered many species," she said finally. "We have studied them, classified them, and determined their usefulness. Some were strong. Some were intelligent. Some had abilities we could not explain. All of them eventually submitted to the Empire. And you think humans will be next? That is what the data suggests." She paused. "But the data has been wrong before." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Lyri walked slowly along the barrier, her eyes never leaving him. 18 years ago, your species made first contact with the Velthari. At that time, you had only just begun to explore beyond your own solar system. Your ships were slow, Your weapons were primitive. By every calculation, you should have been conquered within a single rotation. But we weren't. No. Lyrie stopped walking. You were not. The war has lasted 11 years. Your people continue to resist. Every model we create predicts your defeat, yet that defeat never comes. She turned to face him fully. This is unusual. Ethan leaned his head back against the wall. Maybe your models are broken. Our models have correctly predicted the fall of 37 civilizations. They are not broken. Lyrie's voice carried a hint of something that might have been frustration. There is something about humanity that we do not understand. Something that does not appear in our data. I intend to find out what it is. Good luck with that. Luck is a concept that has no meaning in a universe governed by probability and causation. Lyrie raised her device and began typing something. Tomorrow, I will begin formal interviews. You will answer my questions truthfully and completely. And if I don't? Lyrie looked at him. For the first time, Ethan saw something flicker in her 4 silver eyes. It was not anger. It was not threat. It was something closer to genuine interest. Then I will have to find other ways to obtain the information I require, she said. But I would prefer cooperation. It is more efficient. She turned and walked away without another word. The door at the end of the corridor slid open, then closed behind her with a soft hiss. Ethan sat alone in the cold white light. He thought about his ship, the Daybreak. He thought about his crew. Danny, the engineer who always told bad jokes. Maria, the navigator who kept pictures of her kids taped above her console. Old Pete, the captain who had flown cargo runs for 40 years and never lost a shipment. They were all gone now. Vaporized when the Velthury weapons tore through the hull. Ethan had survived only because he had been in the cargo bay when the attack started. The emergency bulkheads had sealed automatically, trapping him in a small pocket of air while the rest of the ship burned. He should have died with them. Part of him wished he had, but another part of him, a stubborn, irrational part that refused to quit, was glad he was still alive. Because as long as he was alive, there was still a chance. A chance to escape. A chance to fight. A chance to make the Velthury regret the day they decided to pick a fight with humanity. Ethan closed his eyes and let out a long breath. The Velthury commander wanted to know what made humans different. She wanted to understand why they kept fighting when all logic said they should surrender. He smiled to himself in the cold white light. She had no idea what she was getting herself into. The interviews began the next morning. Or at least, Ethan assumed it was morning. There was no way to tell time in the cell. The lights never changed. No one came to bring him food on any kind of schedule. The only way he knew a new day had started was when Commander Lyrie appeared on the other side of the barrier. She brought a chair with her this time. It was a simple thing, made of the same smooth white material as everything else on the ship. She placed it precisely 2 meters from the barrier and sat down with perfect posture. We will begin with basic biology, she said, holding up her device. I have read the available files on your species, but they are incomplete. I require clarification. Ask away, Ethan said. He was still sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. He had not moved since last night. Humans require sleep. Approximately 8 hours per rotation, according to our records. Lyrie looked at him. You have not slept since your capture. Why? Ethan shrugged. Hard to sleep when you're being watched. You are always being watched. There are sensors in every surface of this cell. That doesn't make it easier. Lyrie made a note. Humans require privacy for rest. This is inefficient. The Velthury can rest anywhere, at any time, simply by entering a meditative state. Good for you. It is not a matter of good or bad. It is simply a fact. She tapped her device. Tell me about human memory. Our records indicate that you have limited recall capacity. You forget things easily. Some things, Ethan said. Not everything. What determines what you remember and what you forget? Ethan thought about it. I don't know. Important stuff, I guess. Things that mattered to us. People we cared about. Emotional attachment affects memory retention. Lyrie typed rapidly. Interesting. The Velthari have perfect recall. We remember everything we experience without emotional filtering. This allows for more accurate analysis of data. Sounds exhausting. Lyrie tilted her head. In what way? Remembering everything. Every mistake you ever made. Every bad thing that ever happened to you. Ethan shook his head. Forgetting isn't a bug. It's a feature. Lyrie was quiet for a moment. Then she continued her questions. Over the next several hours, she asked him about human biology in great detail. She wanted to know about their hearts, their lungs, their muscles and bones. She asked about pain and pleasure, hunger and thirst, exhaustion and recovery. She asked about the human lifespan, about aging and death. You live approximately 80 years, she said. Some of you less. Very few of you more. That's right. The Velthari live for 300 years on average. Some of our elders have lived for 500. She studied him with all four eyes. Does this not bother you? Knowing that your existence is so brief? Ethan laughed. It used to bother me a lot, actually. When I was young, I used to stay up at night thinking about it. About how one day I would die and there was nothing I could do about it. And now? Now I don't think about it as much. He leaned his head back. You get used to it. Or maybe you just learn to appreciate what you have while you have it. Lyrie made another note. This is consistent with other data we have gathered. Humans appear to derive meaning from the temporary nature of their existence. You value things more because you know they will end. Maybe. This is illogical. Things do not gain value simply because they are finite. A resource that will run out is less valuable than a resource that will not. Resources, sure, Ethan said. But life isn't a resource. Life is life. It's different. How is it different? Ethan did not have an answer for that. At least, not one he could put into words. The interviews continued for several days. Lyrie asked him about human culture, about art and music, about religion and philosophy. She showed him images of other species the Velthari had encountered over the centuries. The Corvani, she said, displaying a picture of a massive creature with 6 limbs and armored skin. They were stronger than any species we had ever encountered. A single Corvani warrior could defeat 10 Velthari soldiers in physical combat. What happened to them? We subdued them in 40 cycles. Their strength was their only advantage. Once we developed weapons that could penetrate their armor, they had nothing left to offer. She showed him another image. This one was a slender creature with long limbs and huge eyes. The Fengsi. They were faster and more agile than any species in the known galaxy. They could move so quickly that the eye could not follow them. And they're gone too? They surrendered after 60 cycles. Speed meant nothing against weapons that could fire in all directions at once. Image after image appeared on Lyrie's device. Species after species. Each one had possessed some remarkable ability. Each one had fallen to the Velthari Empire. The Silurians had perfect memory and could calculate faster than any computer. The Drathkai could regenerate from almost any wound. The Void Walkers could survive in the vacuum of space without protection. Lyrie lowered her device. All of them were superior to humans in at least one measurable way. All of them were conquered. And we weren't, Ethan said. No, you were not. Lyrie's 4 eyes narrowed. Your species possesses none of these advantages. You are average in nearly every biological category. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your ships are slow. Your weapons primitive. By every metric we use to evaluate a species, you should have been defeated within 2 years of first contact. But the war has lasted 11. Yes. Lyra stood up from her chair and walked closer to the barrier. And in those 11 years, something else has happened. Something we did not anticipate. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What? Rebellion. Lyra's voice was flat, but Ethan could hear something underneath it. Something that might have been concern. 17 systems have risen up against the Empire since humanity entered the war. Species that have been compliant for centuries are now fighting alongside you. They speak of something you gave them. Something that made them willing to risk everything. What do they call it? Hope. The word came out of Lyra's mouth like she was speaking a foreign language. Like she did not fully understand what it meant. They say you gave them hope. Ethan smiled. Good. It is not good, Lyra said sharply. It is destabilizing. It is dangerous. It is causing problems that we have not faced in 1,000 years. She pressed her hand against the barrier between them. What is this hope? Where does it come from? How do you create it? Ethan looked at her for a long moment. He saw the confusion in her 4 silver eyes. The frustration. The desperate need to understand something that could not be measured or quantified. I can't explain it, he said finally. Not in a way that would make sense to you. Try. Ethan shook his head. Hope isn't a thing. It's not a resource or a weapon or a piece of technology. It's a feeling. A belief that tomorrow might be better than today. That things can change. That even when everything looks dark, there's still a chance. A chance for what? For anything. For everything? Ethan met her gaze. Hope is what keeps you going when logic says you should quit. It's what makes you get back up after you've been knocked down. It's the voice in your head that says maybe, just maybe, things will work out in the end. Lyra stared at him. Her 4 eyes were unreadable. This is irrational, she said quietly. Yeah, Ethan agreed. It is, but that's what makes it powerful. You can't fight hope with logic. You can't defeat it with data. It doesn't follow your rules. Lyra said nothing. She simply stood there, looking at him through the barrier, trying to understand something that her entire species had never experienced. After a long silence, she turned and walked away. Ethan watched her go. For the first time since his capture, he felt something other than fear and exhaustion. He felt hope. The days passed slowly in the cell. Ethan lost track of how many. 5, maybe 6, maybe more. Without any way to mark time, everything blended together into one long, endless stretch of cold white light. Lyra came every day. Sometimes she asked questions. Sometimes she just sat and watched him, typing notes into her device. She studied him the way someone might study a puzzle they could not solve. Ethan found himself looking forward to her visits. Not because he enjoyed being interrogated, but because she was the only break in the endless monotony. The only reminder that he was still alive, still part of a universe that existed beyond these 4 white walls. One day, she came without her device. She did not bring a chair. She simply stood on the other side of the barrier, her 4 eyes fixed on him. I have completed my biological and cultural analysis, she said. I have reviewed every piece of data available about your species. I have cross-referenced it with data from 37 other civilizations we have studied. And what did you find? Nothing. The word came out flat and hard. I found nothing. There is no biological advantage, no technological secret, no cultural practice that explains your success. By every measure I can apply, humans should be the weakest species we have ever encountered. But we're not. No. Lyra's voice carried an edge of frustration. You are not. I cannot explain why. She began to pace back and forth along the barrier. It was the first time Ethan had seen her move with anything other than perfect control. She was agitated, confused, maybe even a little scared. The High Council is growing impatient, she said. They want answers. They want to know how to defeat humanity once and for all. They want me to give them a weapon they can use against you. And you can't. I cannot give them what does not exist. Lyrie stopped pacing and turned to face him. There is no weakness to exploit. No vulnerability to target. You are exactly what you appear to be. Soft, fragile creatures with short lives and limited abilities. That's a nice way to put it. Yet, you continue to fight. You continue to resist. You continue to inspire others to join your cause. Lyrie pressed her hand against the barrier. How? How do you do it? Ethan stood up slowly. His legs were stiff from sitting so long, and his wounds ached when he moved. But he walked to the barrier and stood face to face with her, separated only by a few inches of transparent material. Can I ask you something first? Lyrie hesitated, then nodded. When was the last time you did something that scared you? She tilted her head. I do not understand the question. Fear, Ethan said. When was the last time you felt it? Real, genuine fear. Not because you had to, but because you chose to do something even though you were afraid. Lyrie was silent for a long moment. Her four eyes moved slowly, independently, as if searching for an answer in different parts of her mind. The Velthari do not embrace fear, she said finally. We eliminate it. Fear is a response to uncertainty, and uncertainty is simply a lack of data. When we encounter something that causes fear, we gather more data until the fear is gone. That's not the same thing. It is more effective. Ethan shook his head. No, it's not. Because fear isn't just a response to uncertainty. Sometimes it's a response to certainty. To knowing exactly what's going to happen and choosing to face it anyway. Lyrie frowned. It was a small expression, barely visible on her silver-blue face. But Ethan saw it. That makes no sense, she said. Why would anyone choose to do something they know will cause them harm? Because some things are worth being afraid of. Some things are worth the risk. Ethan leaned closer to the barrier. You've conquered species that were stronger than you, faster than you, smarter than you. But you've never conquered a species that wasn't afraid of you. Every species fears us. We are the dominant power in this sector. They fear what you'll do to them. That's not the same as being afraid of you. Ethan smiled. Humans aren't afraid of the Velthari. We're afraid of a lot of things. Death, loss, failure, loneliness. But not you. Why not? Because you're just another problem to solve. Another obstacle to overcome. You're big and powerful and dangerous, sure. But so was every other thing that ever tried to wipe us out. Ethan's smile faded. We've survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We've survived asteroids and famines and our own stupidity. You're just the latest thing trying to kill us. And we're still here. Lyrie stared at him. Something shifted in her eyes. Something that might have been the beginning of understanding. You do not believe you can win, she said slowly. You know the odds are against you. Yet you fight anyway. Yes. Why? It was the same question she had asked a dozen times before. But this time, Ethan heard something different in her voice. Not just frustration or confusion. Something deeper. Something that sounded almost like genuine curiosity. Because giving up is worse than losing, he said. Because somewhere out there are people counting on us. Families waiting for their loved ones to come home. Kids looking up at the stars, wondering if there's anyone out there who cares about them. He paused. We can't let them down. Even if we fail, we have to try. That is not logical. No, it's human. Lyrie was quiet for a long time. She did not move. She did not blink. She just stood there, looking at him through the barrier, processing something that did not fit into any of her categories or classifications. "I have studied 37 civilizations," she said finally. "I have watched species rise and fall. I have seen empires crumble and worlds burn. I thought I understood the universe. I thought I knew how things worked. And now? Now I am not sure." Lyrie lowered her hand from the barrier. "You have shown me something I did not expect to find. Something I cannot explain. What's that?" She looked at him with all four of her silver eyes. "A reason to question everything I believe." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, significant. Ethan realized that he was witnessing something rare, something that probably had not happened in centuries. A Valkyrie was having doubts. "What happens now?" he asked. Lyrie did not answer right away. She turned and walked toward the door, her footsteps slow and measured. At the threshold, she stopped and looked back at him. "I do not know," she said. "For the first time in my life, I do not know what comes next." Then she was gone. Ethan stood at the barrier for a long time after she left. He thought about what she had said, about the doubt in her voice, about the crack that had appeared in her certainty. It was small, just a tiny fracture in the wall of logic and data that the Valkyrie had built around themselves. But Ethan knew something about small cracks. Given enough time and pressure, they could bring down empires. He allowed himself a small smile. Maybe there was hope after all. 3 days passed before Lyrie returned. When she finally appeared at his cell, she looked different. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled. Her posture was not as perfect as before. And there was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Something troubled and uncertain. She did not bring her device. She did not bring a chair. She simply stood at the barrier and looked at him. "I have been thinking," she said. "That's new." Lyrie did not react to the joke. "I have been reviewing my entire career. Every species I have studied. Every report I have written. I have been asking myself if I missed something. If there was a pattern I failed to see. Did you find anything?" "Yes." She paused. "I found that every species I studied shared one thing in common. They all accepted the premise that defeat was inevitable. Once they understood the power of the Valkyrie Empire, they calculated their odds of survival and found them unacceptable. So they surrendered. Makes sense from a logical point of view. It does. It does. It is the rational choice. The smart choice." Lyrie stepped closer to the barrier. "But humanity does not make that choice. You see the same numbers. You understand the same odds. And you fight anyway." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, I want to understand why." Lyrie's voice was different now, softer, more personal. "Not for my report. Not for the High Council. I want to understand for myself." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looked at her, at this alien creature who had spent her entire life inside a framework of logic and data. She was standing at the edge of something new, something she had never experienced before. He decided to give her an honest answer. "You want to know what makes us different? Why we keep fighting even when we shouldn't?" "Yes." Ethan took a deep breath. "It's because we know we're going to lose." Lyrie blinked. All four of her eyes moved in confusion. "That does not make sense. If you know you will lose, why continue? Because losing isn't the point." Ethan walked to the barrier and pressed his palm against it. "From the moment your ships appeared in our sky, we understood that we were outmatched. Your weapons are better. Your ships are faster. Your empire is older than our entire civilization. We knew, right from the start, that we couldn't beat you. Then why resist? Because we don't fight to win." Ethan's voice was calm and steady. "We fight because fighting is what we do when something threatens the people we love. We fight because surrender means giving up on the possibility that tomorrow might be better than today. We fight because somewhere out there, there's a kid looking up at the stars, believing that someone will come to save them. He paused. His eyes met hers through the barrier. And we can't let that kid down. Lyrie stared at him. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. You build empires on logic, Ethan continued. On efficiency and cold calculation. You've conquered species that had everything we don't. Strength, speed, intelligence, technology. And they all broke. They all gave up eventually, because resistance was futile. Because they believed it was. Ethan shook his head. They ran the same numbers you did. They came to the same conclusion. They were logical. They were rational. And that's exactly why they lost. I do not understand. Logic tells you when you can't win. It shows you all the reasons why you should quit. But it can't tell you why you should keep going. Ethan smiled. That's not a logic problem. That's a heart problem. Lyrie was silent. Her 4 eyes stared at him without blinking. Humans are too stupid to know when we're beaten, Ethan said. Too stubborn to quit. Too in love with life to let it go without a fight. You want to know our secret weapon? That's it. We love things. We love people. We love the idea that tomorrow might be better than today, even when all the evidence says otherwise. Love, Lyrie repeated the word like she was tasting something strange. This is an emotional attachment, a chemical response in your brain. Maybe, but it's also more than that. It's a choice, a decision to care about something more than yourself, more than your own survival. Ethan lowered his hand from the barrier. Your people don't understand that. You've spent 2,000 years building an empire based on logic and power, but you've never asked yourselves what you're building it for. Lyrie's eyes widened slightly. We build to survive, to expand, to ensure the continuation of our species. And then what? What do you mean? When you've conquered everything, when every species in the galaxy bows to you, when there's no one left to fight and nothing left to take. Ethan spread his hands. What do you do then? What's the point of living forever in an empire with no purpose? Lyrie did not answer. She could not answer. The question had never occurred to her before. Humans live short lives, Ethan said. 80 years if we're lucky. We know from the day we're born that we're going to die. That everything we build will eventually crumble. That nothing we do will last forever. This should make you despair. It should, but it doesn't. Ethan smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. Because knowing that life is short makes us treasure it. Knowing that love will end makes us love harder. Knowing that we might lose makes winning feel like a miracle. He stepped back from the barrier and spread his arms wide. You asked what makes us different. Here it is. We know we're mortal. We know we're small. We know the universe doesn't care about us, that we're just specks of dust on a tiny rock orbiting an average star. And we love anyway. We hope anyway. We fight anyway. Lyrie's hands trembled slightly at her sides. It was the first time Ethan had ever seen a Valkyrie show physical emotion. Because the only thing worse than losing, he said quietly, is never trying at all. The silence stretched between them. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Lyrie did not move. She did not speak. She just stood there, processing something that had no place in her ordered, logical world. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. I have lived for 247 years. I have served the Empire since I was old enough to hold a datapad. I have believed always that logic was the highest form of existence. That emotions were flaws to be corrected. That the purpose of life was to survive, to succeed, to dominate. She looked at him with all 4 of her silver eyes. You have been my prisoner for less than 2 weeks. And in that time, you have made me question everything I have ever believed." Ethan said nothing. He just waited. "I do not know what to do with this information," Lyrie said. "I do not know how to process what I am feeling. This is new, uncomfortable, frightening." "That's okay," Ethan said gently. "That's what it feels like to be alive." Lyrie stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, something changed in her face. It was not quite a smile. Valkyrie did not smile. But it was something close. Something that had never been there before. "Perhaps," she said, "I am beginning to understand." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Ethan alone in the cold white light. But for the first time since his capture, the cell did not feel quite so cold. Lyrie submitted her report to the High Council 3 days after her final conversation with Ethan. She sat alone in her quarters as she typed the conclusion, her fingers hesitating over each word. Conclusion: humanity cannot be classified using standard metrics. Their strength does not lie in biology, technology, or tactical superiority. It lies in an irrational, unmeasurable quality that I can only describe as spirit. They believe in things that have no evidence. They hope for outcomes that statistics say are impossible. They love with an intensity that defies self-preservation. This makes them unpredictable. It makes them dangerous. And I believe, for the first time in my career, that it makes them unconquerable. She read the words 3 times before sending them. She knew what would happen. She knew how the council would react. But she sent them anyway, because that was what Ethan would have done. The response came within hours. A formal summons to appear before the High Council. A cold statement that her conclusions were being reviewed. A suggestion, not quite a threat, that her judgment had been compromised by extended contact with the prisoner. Lyrie did not care. For 247 years, she had followed the rules. She had done what was expected of her. She had served the Empire with perfect loyalty and unquestioning obedience. And in all that time, she had never once asked herself if any of it mattered. Now she was asking. And she did not like the answers she was finding. A week later, she received word that a prisoner exchange had been arranged. The human resistance had captured 3 Valkyrie officers in a recent battle. They were offering to trade them for any human prisoners held aboard Valkyrie. Ethan was the only human prisoner on her vessel. Lyrie made the arrangements personally. She oversaw the transfer protocols. She ensured that everything was done according to proper procedure. And when the day came for Ethan to leave, she went to his cell one final time. He was standing at the barrier when she arrived. He looked healthier than he had when she first captured him. His wounds had healed. His eyes were brighter. He almost looked like he was ready to fight again. "So this is it," he said. "Yes. A transport will take you to the exchange point in 2 hours. You will be returned to your people." Ethan nodded slowly. "What about you? What happens to you?" Lyrie hesitated. This was not a question she had expected. Prisoners did not usually ask about the well-being of their captors. "I have been removed from active duty pending review of my report," she said. "The council believes my conclusions were influenced by emotional contamination. I'm sorry. Do not be. I made my choice. I knew the consequences." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was that same warm, strange, irrational smile that she had seen so many times over the past weeks. "You know what you did, right? Writing that report?" "I told the truth as I understood it." "No, you did something brave. Something that scared you." Ethan pressed his hand against the barrier. "You asked me once when I last did something that frightened me. Now I'm asking you the same question. When was the last time you faced your fear?" Lyrie understood what he was saying. She had spent her entire life avoiding uncertainty, eliminating risk, staying safe within the boundaries of logic and data. And then she had written a report that challenged everything her people believed. "I suppose I just did," she said quietly. "Yeah, you did." The barrier between them hummed softly. Ethan lowered his hand. "Thank you," he said, "for listening, for trying to understand. I know it wasn't easy for you. It was not. But I am glad I did. What will you do now?" Lyrie considered the question. A week ago, she would have had a clear answer. She would have appealed the council's decision. She would have fought to restore her position. She would have done everything in her power to return to her normal life. But normal did not feel right anymore. Normal felt empty, meaningless, like a life spent counting numbers without ever asking what they added up to. "I do not know," she said. "For the first time in my life, I do not have a plan. That's okay. Sometimes not knowing is the beginning of something better." 2 hours later, Ethan boarded the transport ship. Lyrie watched from the observation deck as the small vessel detached from the cruiser and moved toward the distant rendezvous point. She watched until it was nothing but a speck of light against the stars. Then she returned to her quarters and began to write. Not a report, not an analysis. Something else. Something personal. She wrote about what she had learned. About the strange human who had turned her understanding of the universe upside down. About hope and love and fear and all the other things that the Valkyrie had spent 2,000 years trying to eliminate. She did not know who would read it. She did not know if anyone would care. But she wrote it anyway, because that was what humans did. They created things without knowing if they would last. They loved without guarantee of return. They hoped without evidence of success. And now, so did she. 3 weeks later, Lyrie Vethshan resigned her commission. She found Ethan at the exchange point. He was standing by a human transport vessel, talking with a group of soldiers who had come to bring him home. When he saw her approaching, his eyes widened in surprise. "Commander?" "Not anymore." Lyrie stopped a few feet away from him. She was wearing simple civilian clothes instead of her uniform. She looked different. Smaller, somehow. More uncertain. More human. "You asked me when I last did something that scared me," she said. "I just did something that scared me even more." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. She held it out to him. "This contains the patrol schedules for the 7th Fleet. It should give your people an advantage in the coming campaign. There are also sensor codes, communication frequencies, and supply route maps." Ethan stared at the chip. Then he stared at her. "Why?" Lyrie was silent for a moment. She thought about all the years she had spent serving an empire that valued nothing but power. All the species she had helped to conquer. All the lives that had been destroyed in the name of logic and efficiency. Then she thought about a human in a white cell who had refused to give up. Who had believed in tomorrow even when all evidence pointed to darkness. Who had smiled even when he had every reason to despair. "Because you made me want to find out what happens next," she said softly. "Because for 2,000 years, my people have been so focused on surviving that we forgot to live. And you reminded me that there is a difference." Ethan took the chip. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at her. "You know, you can't go back after this. The Valkyrie will hunt you. They'll never stop. I know. And you're okay with that?" Lyrie considered the question. Was she okay with it? She was giving up everything she had ever known. Her career. Her people. Her entire way of life. She was stepping into an uncertain future with no plan and no guarantee of success. It was terrifying. It was also the most alive she had ever felt. "Yes," she said. "I am okay with that." Ethan smiled. That warm, strange, beautiful human smile that had changed everything. "Welcome to the fight," he said Dot, and for the first time in her long, logical life, Lyrie Vethshin smiled back. It was not a perfect smile. Valkyrie faces were not designed for such expressions. But it was real. It was genuine. It was a choice. She was choosing to hope. She was choosing to love. She was choosing to be more than just a number in an equation. And as she followed Ethan onto the human transport ship, leaving behind everything she had ever known, she realized that she was not afraid, because she finally understood what made humans different. It was not strength or speed or intelligence. It was not technology or resources or tactical genius. It was the simple, stubborn, beautiful refusal to give up. The belief that tomorrow could be better than today. The knowledge that life was short and precious and worth fighting for. It was hope. And now, for the first time in 2,000 years, the Valkyrie had it too. The war was far from over. There would be more battles, more losses, more sacrifices. But something had changed. A crack had appeared in the wall of the Empire. A small light had been lit in the darkness, and Lyrie knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning.